The momentum for responsible investments. I think there are various components. One is absolutely the financial crisis. And if people thought in the financial crisis in 2008, how does this relate to the PRI or the ESG movement? It actually supports it because it makes the point of long-term sustainability of the financial markets, the financial instruments, and a more long-term thinking. We as the PRI mainly represent asset owners and asset managers with a long-term view. It's mainly pension fund, it's insurance companies' money, which has the interest to invest for the long term. And what we are seeing, the short-termism in the market, I will address it later on, is one of our major risks which we have to address. Also very clear, there's much more evidence now, and we will hear it later on about climate change in the various areas. What's the financial impact? We did a study about universal ownership, where we said, what is the cost, the global cost of climate change? And in essence, we as investors, we are bearing to a large extent this cost. Because it is our return, which is damaged by impacts of climate change. Also, a point about the risk management. And if I'm thinking about what are the key drivers for integrating ESG, I see it in two ways. I see it as a risk management tool. And we have tons of examples, if you do ESG screening, that potentially could have avoided a number of severe disasters. So you could have avoided, for instance, BP. You could have avoided way back in Germany Siemens with the corruption scandal. And there are tons of other examples that you say it's a great risk management tool. But besides the risk management, it's also an opportunity. And if you think about where is the future growth in the global GDP, it will be in areas like energy, food, water, infrastructure. And how a company is positioned to take advantage of it. How are they positioned for the transition, for the change which is coming? So therefore, risk management, but also very clearly opportunity. So where do we stand after 5 years? We have now close to 1,000 signatories, which represent, roughly speaking, $30 trillion of US dollars under management. There is a number of double counting in here, I have to say, because if an asset owner reports their numbers and then the asset manager reports it as well, and if they're both signatories, so there is some double accounting, but nevertheless a very important number. But what is more important for me is actually what are the signatories doing? Not that they have signed up and they represent this, but what is actually happening. In the 5 years we have an annual reporting which every signatory has to do. It's mandatory. If people don't report, they will be excluded, they will be delisted. So therefore, and we monitor this on a yearly basis. Now, of our signatories, close 94%, so nearly everyone has an RI policy in place. Active ownership. We have had more than 300 active engagements of our signatories with companies. They are using the network of our clearinghouse to get together to have a theme and then engage with individual companies or with sector companies and to really actively engage and drive change. Transparency is also quite up. So there's and you see it in the report, tremendous progress. Active ownership. Now 88% of our signatories are actually using their voting rights. Nearly 80% are actively engaging, which to me is even more important, that you engage with a company, not only the voting right, the voting is at the end, but you should engage at the beginning and saying, I see this theme, I think you should address corporate governance in your issues. I think you should do this. So active engagement is very important. Again, they use the clearinghouse to really bring it more together. Also, which is encouraging, that nowadays, if you're an asset owner, a pension fund, an insurance company, when you select your manager, because a lot of have third-party management or at least a portion of their funds outsourced, they ask the managers about how strong are they in ESG research. Have they integrated it? How is it lived? And it's not only have you signed the PRI or do you consider it. Now the questions are much closer. They go into how is it integrated? How have you done it in your investment process? These are the questions people are getting, and that's very important. We will also have a work stream where we actually help signatories to ask these questions, to have guidance, what to look for, and so on. That's a little bit more internal. We have our strategy. Our strategy is currently, we are redoing our strategy and refocusing on those challenges going forward. I will address this at the end where I want to give you an outlook. We have transitioned last year to mandatory fees. All our signatories have to pay a fee. The fee ranges from $300 up to $10,000, depending on size of the organization. This gives us a stable revenue stream so that we can have a staff now of 34 and a number of in other countries as well. And we can have long-term planning and long-term work streams. So this was very important. We were, I have to say, a little bit surprised by the retention rate because we were expecting that more people would drop off. And in essence, we have more than 90% who stayed with us, even with the mandatory fee. What are we? I think if we think about what is our goal and vision, it is making ESG mainstream. And to do this in various forms. It is kind of through our signatories. It is through providing the network. And we say the network of networks, teaming up with ASrIA and others, kind of to drive the theme, to include it in all asset classes, to drive academic research, and kind of be very vocal out there. So, and I will explain a little bit later more what actively we're doing. How are we structured from the themes? I would say the first is the awareness. It's the recruitment, it's events like here, it's public policy. We recently received a statement from the EU who actively encourages pension funds in the EU to sign the PRI and to report on what they're actually doing. It is the support, what we are providing to our signatories, and it's the networking, which is very important, kind of that you come together, you share views, you talk about what is best practice. And the networking, just as an example, I was recently in Brazil, and there the investment community, the asset managers, and the pension funds are working very close together. And they came to the conclusion saying, well, we feel that the broker houses in our area, the mainstream broker houses, still haven't really done integrated reporting on ESG matters in their research. They are specialists, but they're saying the big broker houses have not integrated this component in their analysis. So they have an event on the 25th, tomorrow, and they come together and they will write a letter to all broker houses and demanding that in the future ESG is embedded in the research. And those broker houses who will not follow, they will drop them from their approved list. An example where local companies came together, identified a need, and taking a proactive action step now. So this is an encouragement, and I think I would say here in Asia we also have to see what are potentially themes which we can drive here in the market. But also kind of is even the Brazilian example that we have it here as well, and should we drive the same issue? So kind of, that's again the network of networks and regional and global interaction. So where are our current gaps, I would say? One is we are still not global. We have global signatories, but I think we, from a mindset and from a representation, there are areas which are clearly underrepresented. Asia, the Arabic world, USA, and part of Europe as well. We want to cover all asset classes, so we'll go later on. We have special needs for some type of signatures, for instance, family offices, sovereign wealth funds, and so on, which we have to address. And we need to do much more in the collaboration between the various parts. How are we organized? We have the implementation support, which kind of helps signatories how to implement ESG. We have the strategic initiatives. I will go into them later. We have obviously communications and our own business operations and finance. The Clearinghouse has been the most active component. It has 5 staff. And as I said, we have more than 300 activities in the Clearinghouse, and also more than 300 signatories are actively engaged. So it's a significant amount. It's more and more growing, and it helps in various forms. With respect to the Clearinghouse, you can see here, I just put out a few: executive pay bonus, water usage, board diversity, energy efficiency. These are themes which signatories come together and then drive action items towards policy making, individual companies, and sectors of companies. What we will do here as well, the Clearinghouse so far is bottom up. It's the signatories who come together and develop a theme and saying we should look into and drive transparency, let's say, on water usage. What we will also do is kind of link it more with the UN and also have a top-down approach and saying what are the major themes. Most of them are identical, but how do we best cover them? For instance, Ban Ki-moon has launched for 2 weeks ago Energy for All, a major project where he brought together world leaders, world corporations, and he says we want to drive energy for all with a clear statement: renewable energy, reduction of energy use, and infrastructure building that in energy can be really provided for all. So it's a very aggressive program. He said he will report at the next General Assembly on it, and we are now working on it, but also kind of how can investors support this? So very important. Reporting, as I said, we do our annual reporting. We are currently redoing it. We had a survey out there. We asked the signatories to provide us feedback. And on a high level, what the changes will be, we had in the past the reporting mainly on the 6 principles. The 6 principles are aspirational, and they cover the whole investment chain. In practice, people are doing it per asset class. So what we are doing now, it will be much more, what are you doing in public equity? What are you doing in private equity? Where are you invested? And how do you implement this in the various asset classes? So it will be much more tailor-made. We'll also differentiate whether you do external management or internal management. So it will be much more tailor-made and will be rolled out next year as a test and will be mandatory then in 2013. We have our asset class work streams here listed, kind of the main asset classes, and fixed income is clearly one where we need to focus on much more. I think it's important that we kind of make major steps forward because, again, if you think about pension fund, insurance company money, long-term investments, fixed income needs to be addressed. It's very easy on fixed income corporate, because if this is a publicly traded company, you have already the research from the equity side, so it should be a nice migration into corporate, but also sovereign bonds and other fixed income instruments. Looking forward, and what are the challenges for the PRI? I said, one, we need to become global. That's very clearly will drive our strategy, how we address it. And this means very clearly also to take into account the specific needs of regions. You can't implement an UK system of engagement in a number of other areas, kind of because the markets are different. And if you try to do this, you just upset totally markets. So kind of we need to see how we address best ESG per region for the regional needs. Some themes are obviously global, but a lot of them, how they are implemented, how you engage, is really a regional issue. Second, I said all asset classes. That's very important. The people kind of, pension funds, insurance companies, they invest along the whole chain. We can't be just in a few. We need to do the research in all asset classes. Thirdly, that's very important, and we do it with training, we do it with seminars like here, with events. The whole thing is a change management process. We need to change how the investment universe is behaving. We have good steps, but I think it's a change management process which we need to support by the PRI, which we need to support through our signatories, but also to be quite out there and drive it throughout the market. And lastly, we have to see we need to be much more vocal. At the moment, even you who are signatories in the room, you signed up, you hear about it, but in essence the PRI doesn't have a strong visibility. If you ask what have the PRI really done, I think most people are even not aware of the examples which I mentioned just. And when we need to use, as I said, the power we have. And we need to have themes which we need to drive, which we need to engage, which we need to engage with the political side, and so on. And if I'm thinking about this will be our strategy, what kind of themes? I would say one, very clearly, the misalignment of short-termism in the market and the long-term objective of the investors. And we have to go through step by step, what is the misalignment here? Is it regulatory driven? Is it accounting driven? Is it compensation driven? Is it still kind of that the board looks at performance numbers quarterly and doesn't seem that potentially really for a pension fund quarterly performance really doesn't really matter a lot. It should be the long-term performance. But if the investment manager feels pressure, if they have to report that this fund has underperformed the last quarter, he will act more short-term. So I think it starts with education also in the boardroom. Second, long-term financial markets. I think we need to engage, and I use here the example, we are preparing for Rio +20 next year, and Ban Ki-moon clearly said to me and said, well, Wolfgang, tell me what you're currently doing with your initiative and how much assets and how engaged are they, but then tell me how much more you can do if. So the big question is, what do we need, what do we require as the if in order to be more engaged, to provide more funds, to provide more liquidity to the challenges of the world, particularly in energy, food, water, and infrastructure. And so we have to work on this. And I have a few ideas, but kind of we will bring the experts together and saying, what should we require from the political side so that we step up and do more? Also, I think it's quite important for us that we drive, as I said, the main themes, energy and so on, but also that we really live it, that we engage in it, and that we kind of on a daily basis consider ESG, and that we are much more outspoken, that we also highlight the negatives. I think there are areas in the world where corruption is still a major issue. We need to say corruption, there's massive value destroyed. Why don't we speak up more and engage more? Climate change. We know what the impacts are. I'm coming from a reinsurer. We know in our risk premium pricing what the costs are going forward because of climate change. So why do we accept this? People are saying, well, we don't know, it's so vague. No, we can drill it down. So we have to do it, but we need to be really much more engaging. So we need to be out there, we need to talk, and we need to kind of get together as a group. So I think these are the major challenges for us going forward. They are different, but I think it's important that we address them. And we, as the PRI, will be working with all of you, with various networks, and kind of get together and be kind of the facilitator and help you. But kind of it's in this room where it has to start.